So let's say the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher tishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. All right. So do we have a volunteer to read?
Sure. Go ahead, Judith.
Then he philosophically decided, even though I have two trades in hand, who knows, perhaps neither of these will remain important. It would be better for me to learn a craft that will always be important. Probing with his insight and philosophy, he determined to learn medicine, which is always needed and always esteemed. Now the way of learning medicine is to first learn Latin, the language, its writing, as well as its wisdoms of sophistry. And this too, on account of his brilliant mind, he mastered in a short time, a quarter year, and he became a big doctor, a philosopher, and an expert in all fields of wisdom.
Okay. So this doesn't sound like too many doctors that I know these days. I don't know about you, but although having just had an appointment with David Abrams, he's pretty terrific, but I doubt that he's got Latin. Bella, I heard the bell. Relax. If somebody rings the front door bell, front door, I don't have a back door. Somebody rings the doorbell, Bella thinks it's her job to let me know that somebody rang the bell.
Good.
You know, Rabbi Baker, sometimes when the phone rings,
Yeah.
I turn to my wife, Suki, and I say, Suki, the phone's ringing. So I'm playing the same role. And I know no Latin.
Well, the Latin is the big part. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about there are some distinctions in this paragraph that are worth paying attention to. I just lost the whole thing.
I know. I did that.
Oh, you did that.
I was closing 100 windows.
100 windows? Oh my gosh. Well, one of the 100 probably should have stayed open.
Anyway, you can keep going, Kerry, while he finds it.
Well, I kind of need to have the text in front of me.
Oh,
We'll give Kim a break. He always does everything right, so we're not going to worry about this. We're going to give him a couple of minutes to find this again. Yeah, well.
so I remember one of my Buddhist teachers would frequently say, there is no end to knowledge.
There's no end to knowledge.
Yep.
That's a good saying. That would stand you in good stead almost anywhere.
But he was not saying it as a good attribute, just as a characteristic.
Yes.
It still doesn't give you the satisfaction that you're looking for in, as we say, in your heart. Or in
I will tell you a similar story that occurred to me when I was in the seminary. One of my mentors was a fellow named Eugene Borowitz, who was one of the major philosophers of the Reform movement. And I went to visit him in his office at the school. He's on the phone with somebody. He tells me to sit down and wait. He's on the phone for a while. And he says, yes, I see. I understand what you mean. Yes, I get it. Blah, blah, blah. Finally, he gets off the phone. And this is the guy who's my mentor.
Mm-hmm.
After he hangs the phone, he says, now that guy really knows something. And I'm thinking to myself, my mentor is talking to somebody that he thinks really knows somebody, but I'm talking to my mentor. Oh, it just was a perfect illustration of the scale of values, and sort of along the line of your stories. No end to wisdom. All right. So what do you think it means when the text says he philosophically decided? How does the word philosophically function there?
Well, I think he's working on the mind, but there are other areas that aren't the mind, that there's heart and there's spirit. And so
It wasn't impulsive.
Yeah, so you're reading philosophically as an emotional state. You know,
I am.
I think that's what you're doing. You're saying that it was an emotion more than
No, I'm saying it was not impulsive.
right. So when you say so and so is very philosophical.
He thinks a lot, a very rational thinker.
Yeah, okay, a rational thinker.
I don't think that's feeling.
Well, sometimes when it's used that way, I can see what you're saying. I think also it can also be to be unaffected by something, to be what's the $5 word? Equanimous. You know, it's
Equanimous.
equanimous.
Yeah.
Is that how it goes?
Yes.
Okay. So equanimous. Equanimous? Really?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So,
equanimity is also a word. With equanimity.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure what I was trying. Did I express an idea there?
I don't know.
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Look, his process was not one that stirred up emotions in him. He was kind of distant, kind of what? Well, when we say that somebody is acting philosophically, that they're thinking a lot about something.
And objective too.
Sorry?
Objective.
Objective. All right, fair enough. Now, if this kind of decision that he's making regarding career choice, what are his criteria?
Well, he wants something that will last a long time, that won't go out of style.
Will go out of style, that'll be always useful.
He says important.
Right. Always needed and always esteemed.
Right. So does medicine qualify?
Sure, his mother can always say, my son the doctor.
Yes. If his mother is a Jew boo. Yes. Yeah, all right. So we can understand why he might choose medicine, but why would medicine stand out in that regard? Aren't there other careers, other jobs that would have the same qualities? I can tell you that my parents didn't think a rabbi qualified.
Did not think so?
Did not think so, no.
Yeah.
They wanted me to be
If you
a
take a
lawyer.
look at if you take a look at medicine these days,
Yeah.
it's not clear that medicine qualifies anymore.
That is a good point. Why wouldn't it? Or why might it not?
Well, first off, it's become very specialized.
Yes.
And so therefore, what people need to know is narrower and narrower. And everything's being decided upon by the pharmaceuticals and the insurance companies.
Well, and even before you get to that level, that's true. I'm not disputing that. But I just had a doctor's appointment with my cardiologist. What does he do? He reads the lab reports.
Yep.
It's not like he really has to think a lot about what the lab reports are saying. I mean, he's a thoughtful guy, and he does consider what the right prescription for me is based on the lab values, but he's basically good at reading the lab reports.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know about you all, but when I was a kid growing up, we had a family doctor, and his name was Marvin Fallenberg. Okay? And Marvin Fallenberg was our doctor for many, many years. He was the only guy we ever went to. And he knew everything about everybody in our family. Now, I don't know how good a doctor he was. You know, maybe I would have had better health if I'd gone to a raft of specialists. But that's not what you did then. Because what you got from the doctor was not just somebody to interpret the lab reports.
Mhm.
What you got was somebody who had an interest in you and your family that went beyond the simple reading of an output from a lab test. Now, the reason I mention this is I'm trying to find a space for the word philosophically decided. Where does philosophy come into modern medicine? It really doesn't, at least not in the way that it used to. So I think that there is meant here some qualities about the profession of medicine that are not ones that we tend to expect these days. So what are those qualities? Well, I think they're the more along the lines of interest or personal history or emotional considerations that we might have. So why is it important for that to be a consideration in terms of a career? The guy has now gone through several iterations of career choices. He doesn't want to do it anymore, and he has to.
Right. I think Kim was onto something before, in that it's a very sort of rational, thought through kind of decision, weighing the pros and cons of it, not using his intuition or, as you said, his emotions. He's very much in his head about this thing, and thinking that somehow this is going to give him some underlying satisfaction.
So in the context of personal growth or of personal development, what's the connection here? How is this apposite? How is this something that's useful?
Well, it's very useful, but we probably all know somebody who's really, really smart and really knows a lot in a lot of fields. But how about feelings? I think that's totally out of the picture, and obviously comes into the picture with the next story.
Well, yes, but we have a little chunk here that is meant to come to some sort of resolution at the end, because the guy makes a choice, and we are told that he becomes a big doctor, he's successful, a philosopher and expert in all fields of wisdom. So the choice is not just about the narrow profession of medicine,
but
it's something more.
Are they using the word wisdom in the same way that we are, like a wisdom tradition, or are they using it in the sense of knowledge?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, I'm suspicious about this, the use of the word sophistry, because Socrates hated sophistry. He thought it was being able to win arguments as opposed to finding truth.
Well, that's a good point. Although sophistry had a much wider meaning than we often take it to have today. We often use the word sophistry in a negative way. We say that something is merely sophistry, and we mean that it is without real substance, without real depth, that it is some kind of imposition of logic that is not really appropriate.
It says here in the definition, the use of fallacious arguments. especially with the intention of deceiving.
Yeah, yeah,
An area, yeah.
that's very helpful. So that I don't think that's what the text here has in mind. And the sophists, as a Greek philosophical school, were not denigrated in any way. That was serious stuff. It was the use of logic in coming to decisions. It was, Sophia was meant wisdom. So to be a sophist was not a negative attribute.
Well, it was to Socrates, but
Well,
So
I think it's fair to say that the text from concerning Socrates is not written by Socrates, but written by his opponents. That he gets into trouble because of the sophists. But even so, in the question of this particular paragraph, choosing a career, what does that have to do with personal growth?
So, but just before we try to answer that question, Rabbi,
Sure.
it does strike me that what we are reading here is a translation.
True.
And so we don't know what the original Yiddish or Hebrew, whatever language Rabbi Nachman wrote in, or spoken, what the relationship between the words sophistry and wisdom as we use them today.
That's a very good point, Michael. Yeah, there can be shades of meaning there that are not conveyed accurately in the
yeah, it does seem to me that it's meant in a positive way here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
that's what I would say as well.
Yeah.
But it's also the interpretation of wisdom as knowledge means that he's been stuck inside his head and his own ego, and he has no contact with the spiritual side of his life. And he's been looking in all of these places. It's like the old story of, the rabbi is seen looking under a lamppost at night, and the student comes over and says, "Rabbi, what are you doing?" He says, "I'm looking for my keys." He says, Did you lose them here?" "No, but this is where the light is." So this here is he's looking in all of these places of book learning, of skills and crafts and
Right.
acclaim, and he thinks, and with the idea that somehow this is going to imbue him with the ultimate satisfaction that he's looking for.
Well, that's not so unusual. How
No.
many people make a decision about a career because they think that it's going to be a source of meaning, a source of success? Michael, what's up?
No, I'm saying me. I did.
Yeah, I was just thinking all of us, we call this a self-improvement program.
Yeah, I think we overload the career choices that we make, expecting more return from them than is reasonable to expect.
And we're always dissatisfied with ourselves because of this search.
I think that's often true. I know so many people over the years who chose careers for all sorts of reasons and who were very unhappy in their work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I always think of, was that you, Judith? Yeah.
I became a librarian because I thought I could just sit and read books. I was wrong.
That was not what librarians do. No. Does anybody here remember the old movie, The Bridge on the River Kwai?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you remember the famous line? that the Japanese um, uh, director of the camp always was saying, you must be happy in your work.
Mhm.
And of course, here you are at a prison camp. How can you possibly be happy in your work? It's kind of a challenge. I know so many people, even people who become rabbis, who are not happy in their work.
Sure.
Uh, and yet, what are the criteria that this fella has for what would be a good career choice? Would you agree with the criteria that he puts out there?
Well, you know, as a career choice, they're not. It's not bad to be. He's needed and esteemed. So that's not, you know, as a career, that's not a bad thing.
That's not nothing. Not
If
chopped liver.
it's not chopped liver, unless that's where you're looking for the ultimate satisfaction.
Ah, you see, now that you put your finger exactly on it, Michael, because there's the impression, at least I get the impression from this section of the story, that this guy, given what has already happened, he's looking for something more
Mhm.
than just the outward signs, like being esteemed, for example. I think that he's looking, and certainly if we're talking about personal development, we are all looking for something more than just outward recognition.
Mhm.
We're looking for something from within that is much more substantial. And that if we mistake um, our jobs as a source of the more substantial inner meaning, we're going to be very unhappy.
Yeah.
So, and I think that that's true of many people, not just today, but over the years.
Yeah.
You know? So, and yet, we probably, at least these days anyway, we spend a greater percentage of our time having internal debates about what career to follow than almost anything else. I listen to conversations that my daughter Emily has and what sorts of decisions she's making about um, her major at the university, and so on and so forth. And it's a lot of her colleagues are being directed by impulses that really are not going to wind up being very successful for them, in my estimation. You know, how much money you're going to make, what are the day-to-day activities that you're going to have, things of that sort. And I rarely think that that's a source of deep satisfaction. My daughter, by the way, is majoring in something I never would have guessed that she would be interested in: international relations and political science.
Wow.
I have no idea where this came from,
Mhm.
but she is thinking about what it is she wants to do with those majors, which I kind of think is the wrong way around. Don't shouldn't you think about what you want to do and then find the major that prepares you for that? I don't know. Back in the 60s, that's what we did.
It sounds like she's learning that kind of work to be with nonprofits that help others. That's what would.
Well, you know, I asked her, what kind of job do you think this leads to? Are you thinking maybe of foreign service or politics, whatever? She said, no, I'm not thinking about any of that stuff. So I don't know. She's smart, she'll come to some kind of decision. I just hope that it's based on things like internal satisfaction, as well as the outward appearances, the outward um, reflection that you get from the people around you. That is not sustaining.
Right. But I mean, I remember when I was in college, and I mean, I had an aptitude for math and computers, but I wasn't thinking about what I was going to do for a career or a job. I just pursued the stuff that seemed to interest me.
See, but
And
you're a different generation, Michael. I mean, these things change over the years. And these days, college students are so, what I want to say, they're so scared of not having a job, of not being able to support themselves or pay back loans or
Mhm.
whatever it is.
Mm.
You know, when I was going to school, maybe it was true for you as well, we didn't even think about that because we figured, oh, there's always going to be a job. We'll find a job that we like
Mhm.
and that'll be fine. There's I don't have to decide on a major because it's going to prepare me or not for a job.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, there always were some people, mostly engineering students, who were very practical about these kinds
Well,
of things.
and lawyers and doctors. No, there were a fair number of people who said, "I want to be a doctor," and but there were also a lot of people who said, "Oh, I'm interested in that, and I'll do that." Maybe a little bit more in the liberal arts colleges than in the colleges
Yeah.
that were geared for
Well, those
specific.
were the people I know. I went to Colgate. It was a very fine, small Eastern liberal arts
Yeah,
college.
yeah, it's
You
great.
know, they prepared you for doing absolutely nothing. Just prepared you for deciding whether or not you wanted to learn something, pass or fail. You know, that's what it was like in the 1960s. So, what I'm getting at here is, in terms of what we actually spend our time on, I think sometimes we misapply our energies and we make mistakes about what's really important for our future happiness, for our personal growth, and so on and so forth. Being clear about those things is so important, and we often are not. Sometimes we just make mistakes, but sometimes we get convinced by some kind of argument or some kind of encouragement from parents or others and find it difficult to find our own pathway. And in this case, I'm not sure exactly where this guy is going. Um, he says there's an important part here. The way of learning medicine is to first learn Latin, the language and its writings, as well as the wisdoms of sophistry. Why would learning the language of Latin be so important?
Oh,
Well,
because the medical terms.
the names of the parts of the body are based on Latin.
Yeah. So learning the vocabulary
Mhm.
of the career, and I think this would apply to other careers as well as medicine, you have to know the vocabulary because that tells you so much about what the career really is and what you need in order to be successful in a more than superficial way. You know, so this is a guy who wants to go deeper and be successful in a more than superficial way, but I don't think he quite has it yet. You know, he
No,
can he thinks he can learn this all in a quarter of a year. I don't know.
he does.
Yeah, well, he certainly thinks he can.
Well, no, it says here he mastered in a short time and he became a big doctor. So he did it in a quarter of a year. It's not that
But
he thinks.
but mastered what, Michael? I mean, are we talking just mastering the skills and the vocabulary of the profession, or did he master anything more important, like the things he needs to be able to uh, uh, live according to in order to find satisfaction and
Oh, well,
and meaning?
no, I mean, he learned all the things you need to be a doctor and a philosopher.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he learned all the head things as I was.
I think that's true, and I agree with you about that. But I think that that's not necessarily um, a sustaining answer to the question about growth. I mean, it is a kind of growth to learn how to be a doctor. Of course, it is, but it's almost at odds with what you and I would mean when we say personal growth. It's I don't think learning how to learning a skill, learning a backhand or something is personal growth. I mean, I guess it is in a way, but I think there's something deeper that we're looking for when we use an expression like that. So I'm left with a little bit of a sense of confusion and questioning about this. I am more inclined to read story as one where there are a number of false starts.
Mhm.
And these false starts are false because they don't lead to real growth. They lead to the acquisition of skills, the acquisition of professional knowledge, the acquisition of all sorts of things that, as you say, are cerebral, but
Mhm.
not necessarily ones that lead to growth. So,
Yep.
yeah, Kim.
You're on mute, Kim.
I thought I saw you put up your hand, Kim.
The amazement we're seeing with the Republicans
Well,
is
how do you get the Republicans?
it's with the Republicans that what we're seeing is people who have acquired a lot of expertise in various fields to get to where they are, and yet not have a development of character. And maybe this is a real prejudicial statement, but there's something missing there.
Well,
And this guy is still has it missing.
well,
I
I
think.
think you might be able to say that that's true of politicians generally, although maybe even more Republican politicians.
I mean, right now, people who aren't standing up for values that are pretty shared from the beginning of time, like justice, like truth.
Yes, yes, but how do they get away with it? Is the question. I mean, it seems to me, there used to be a deficit that you had to be accountable for.
Well, they're protecting each other.
But somebody is out there disagreeing, and nonetheless, these folks, Republicans or otherwise, are impervious to to a sense of loss about it. Somehow, the impression I always get is that they're, how do I put it? They're not aware of the fact that there is a deficit. It's not like that they are super well self-aware and they're willing to put up with that.
Well, our guy here, the clever man, also is not aware at this point that there's something missing.
Yes, I think that's true. And finding what it is that's missing is a central part of his quest. That's what personal growth would be, finding what's missing and finding a way to develop it or supply it or to find it somewhere. That's the kind of thing that I think, at least I have in mind when I am speaking about personal growth. There is some kind of quality that is missing. And if I can properly identify it and therefore can figure out how to develop it or acquire it or find it, I'm on my pathway towards real development. But if I'm not aware of the deficit, I've got trouble.
The same occurs in art, where someone develops all these skills, and yet they're not able to really either be really creative or really expressive.
You know, I was watching something the other day where it was a show that involved an art forger, and somebody said in evaluating these forgeries that you could see from the works themselves that this person did not have an artistic vision. Now,
right, they might be better. In fact, I know of one Japanese artist who was a national treasure, and he said, people come and bring my works to me to authenticate them, and I know that they're fakes when they're too good.
Well, you know what? I can understand that. I think
the forgers are better technically than some of the artists they're imitating.
Well, I don't know about, generally in the world, but I can tell you that among rabbis, that is definitely true as well. One of the reasons why I find it difficult sometimes to go to services when I'm just a Jew in the pew, because it's hard for me not to look critically at what the rabbi who's leading the service is doing and say to myself, well, I would have done that this way, or I would have taken the sermon in that direction, or whatever it might be. Yeah, Judith.
But this is the process of maturation. I mean, first you're a child, then you're an adolescent, then your job is to work and marry and have a family. And there's a reason why elders are supposedly, not necessarily, supposedly wise, because they've had the life experience and they can put that together. And that's why you youngsters should listen to me.
We are listening, Judith.
Well put, Judith. We got exactly what we deserved. Well, I think that is true in so many different areas. I think about it in terms of parenting. Nobody wants to learn from their parents' experience. That's like ridiculous.
I think even mastering all these things in a short time, a quarter year, meant something to me. Something was missing, like an accelerated course. They're never the same as the whole 16 weeks.
That's true.
I did a 16-week semester, I think, in 2 weeks once.
Actually, I'm not sure that that's the point of it, Kim. I would disagree with you.
You don't think it's meant here?
No, I think that what's meant here is that he is so cerebral and so quick and so intelligent that he really is learning things at breakneck speed.
But you missed something.
Wait. And I mean, he is learning it and learning it completely as if it were the longer course of what us mere mortals would do. But it is actually, while it looks like it's a good quality, it's actually an impediment, because it makes him think that the cerebral path is the correct path to satisfaction.
I think there's something in that, because, as I'm going through life and therapy and so forth, getting out of my head and into my heart is something that I've been working on a lot in recent days, and not something that comes naturally for me. So I can see your point, Michael. I think that also relates, though, to what Kim is saying, because acquiring the heart side is really it's something that you can forget about or leave out. To master something often means to master something intellectually, or in terms of skill. Mm-hmm. But that's not necessarily what growth is. It
Mhm.
is a kind of limited sort of growth, but growth is, as I'm thinking about it, is much more on the heart side than on the cerebral side. I'm
Hmm.
not denigrating the value of the life of the mind, but I'm just saying that there can be parts of what we would normally think of, how about normally, that we might think of as ways in which we would like to grow, but which are at odds with doing things fast or just intellectually. And, and that's what you leave out of the equation. You know, talking about why was it so difficult for politicians in the United States, some politicians in the United States, to see what was so outrageous about separating families at the border and putting kids in cages. They had no empathy. They had no um, sense of shame or, you know, all these much more touchy-feely kinds of qualities of mind. You know, and that was, you know, to give the best construction that you can to this whole debacle. So you could look at a guy like Stephen Miller and say, here's a guy who doesn't have an emotion ever. He doesn't understand them and he doesn't have them. His way of dealing with the world is pure intellectual. That's to give the best construction to what he is. The other way of thinking about Stephen Miller is that he's just a son of a bitch. That,
But
that
you,
could be true too. But that's kind of what makes you a son of a bitch, isn't it? You know, when you can't have empathy or even sympathy with other people. You can't identify with their situation. You can't feel what they feel. Isn't that is that a necessary condition? Being an SOB? I think maybe it is.
well, nowadays they say somebody like that is on the spectrum.
On the spectrum, as the spectrum of autism. Yeah, you know, that's interesting that you say that, and it's become a very common expression.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you something. My elder daughter, Ilana, about a year ago, received a diagnosis of autism, and she'd been struggling with it, unbeknownst to her or anybody else, forever. But it explained a lot of things about her.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I learned in talking to her is that there is no such thing as an autism spectrum. There are different ways that autism manifests itself, but it's not like you can be a little autistic or more autistic or super autistic. They're just different ways of being autistic. This is what I understood from her explanation. I didn't realize that, you know, that somehow these are expressions of ways of being in the world. And that actually was very helpful because what it meant was that you didn't have to look to be cured of autism. You had to learn how to cope with a way of being. And that, I think, stands us in good stead. What is it that makes us happy? It's not like there is a spectrum, a real spectrum of happiness. There are things we do, activities, choices we make that make us happy and others that don't. But it's not if we choose X and it doesn't make us happy enough that we need to have more of X. We just need to increase our Xness and we'll be happier. I think that may not be how it actually works. Although I think it's what we're encouraged to think. So, you know, in that context, it's easy to understand why this is uh, why this passage says that this was philosophically decided. because all of a sudden it's about a quality of mind that is beyond the normal ways we make choices. You know, to decide something philosophically says to me, whatever that's worth, that we are willing to use other criteria than the sort of standard conventional criteria that we use. How much money are we going to make? What kind of position will we have? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So the direction this seems to be going, because in the previous paragraph, he became an expert gem cutter. So that involved manual labor. And now he's doing stuff that is more cerebral, that is more, philosophical. You've got to learn the language, and you got to learn about medicine and all of those kinds of things.
Right.
It's different kind of skill. And as we're probably going to see, the first one didn't leave him with ultimate satisfaction, and this isn't going to leave him with ultimate satisfaction.
No, I think he's going to have to go further.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And in a way that is typical of how we might say we ought to be making decisions about who we are and what we want to pursue in our lives, but we often get sidetracked from.
Yeah.
For a whole variety of seemingly legitimate reasons. I remember a time when I was younger, I had braces on my teeth, and I used to go to the Glideman brothers. There were two fraternal twins who both became orthodontists. And I remember once doing a calculation of how much money they made with per patient, And I thought, well, you know what? I should be an orthodontist. That's what I should do in life. And just go to medical school, become an orthodontist, and then I got it made. Fortunately, I did not do that because I think I would have been a terrible orthodontist.
So
But not just that. I mean, I found other qualities that are much more valuable than just making X amount of dollars per patient and then multiplying by the number of minutes that you have to allot to the patient.
So I suspect that my daughter's working on a statewide project to encourage new teachers, because 1/5 of teachers quit within 5 years. So
I've heard that, yes.
This is a big $1 million project, and they're going to do additional education for the teachers and mentoring and all that stuff. And then I have a friend who's retired doctor who's coaching other doctors who are burning out. And then, as you talked about dentists, they have supposedly the highest suicide rate. So people
I've heard that, yes.
People are learning these skills, but it's not fulfilling them in their lives.
Well, there may be reasons for that. My son is, he teaches French at the university level, but he also is involved in a adjunct faculty support program at one of the schools where he teaches.
It's 1 o'clock.
Yeah, well, it's 1 o'clock already. To finish the thought, there is so little learning on the university level about how to teach, what makes for good teaching, and to acquire the skills that you need, not only to be a good teacher, but to be satisfied with your teaching, which is what his program he's working in is all about. There is I think there is a little bit more attention paid to that now than used to be the case, but I'm not so sure that it's enough yet. But anyway, it's 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming, and have a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
see you all next week, if not before.
Hope so.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.